Anybody that would like to speak, there's a card back on that table you need to fill out that, for the public that wants to speak.
Hello, can you hear me?
Meeting of the Dalton City Council to order. Mr. Mock will lead us in the pledge.
It's over here.
Here he is.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next up is the approval of the agenda. We've got one item that needs to be taken off. It's not ready yet, which is item 3, master service agreement with CyberWatch Systems Consulting Services. Their motion that we amend the agenda is.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Fair. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Mock. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Next is public commentary. Ace Hammond. Ace. You want to speak? You didn't? You don't want to speak? Harry Harden. You want to speak? I know it. I got it. I'm calling you to speak. Yes, this is when you do it before the meeting. Yeah. Yeah.
This is concerning the purchase of the property that is for the watershed pool. That's what my concerns are about. Number one, that property, and I don't know this for a fact because I hadn't researched it, but that property probably didn't perk in the very beginning when the building was put on that property. So we're talking about the city of Dalton purchasing something that was already a mistake. That's one thing I'd like to research. I'd like for this whole thing to be tabled until we get a little more information. And I know y'all are going to give us a presentation tonight. I'm glad of that. But we feel like this has been rushed through, and this is a very important issue. We've got other things that are going on in this city that need to be addressed. As far as water, and I'm on my end of Dixon Acres. My problem is erosion, and I've lost a lot of footage because of it. That's my concern too, personal. But I know that there are houses in our town that have been flooded underneath, and the people on the east side of town, they can't afford to do it. In the city, I plead for the city to help them get their property up to standard so they still have a house to live in or a place to go, or purchase that at the time. I just don't feel like that this property that y'all are trying to buy at this time should be a priority. I mean, put it on the list, but let's do these other things that are far more important as far as water retention in trying to solve our water problem. I think.
Mayor, I'll address one thing about this thing being rushed. First of all, we've had this stormwater issue since I was mayor the first time, since 2008, that we've been trying to address. This time, and we've been in earnest addressing this for over the last year and a half. We hired a foremost stormwater expert in the world to come up with the plan. And that's really whose plan that we're following. And that's where these items came from, the ones that we're trying to address first. But the entire plan is probably going to end up costing a minimum of $26 million before we're through. Obviously, we don't have that kind of money right now. We've got, probably close to half that money now to start correcting these problems. And if we thought for 1 minute that we were going to harm your subdivision at all by this program, we would not do it. There's other things that are going to be occurring in that subdivision also about stream bank restoration, things like that. So this is really not selected by really us. We're just approving a plan that our stormwater experts, who we're paying a lot of money to, have said the way we need to address this problem. And y'all aren't the first ones. Ridge Street's probably the number one, the first thing that's going on. And we're making tremendous progress there. And I think if you'd ask some of the neighborhood over there, they're very happy with what's going on.
Okay. Well, we're not. There's not a single one of us that is in favor of this project.
We haven't done anything yet.
Good. Good.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to do. We
Okay.
would like it tabled.
Okay.
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 Thank
Carol Lumpkin.
First of all, I don't have a dog in this fight because this is not my neighborhood, but I so treasure the neighborhoods that we have in Dalton. And I think that we should do everything humanly possible to keep neighborhoods from being eroded by things like water retention ponds. I mean, the idea of tearing down a house, putting a water retention pond in a neighborhood, I've experienced what happens to a house when it's completely demolished. And that was when the Methodist Church tore down the Rock House and put in the prayer garden, which is not really used as a prayer garden. It's used for a place for weddings and all kinds of places where children come to play in the fountain. And it hurts a neighborhood when a house is missing from a street. It affects the property the property value of all the other houses on the street. So I love Mary's suggestion, table it. See if there's not some other solution. Sometimes engineers want the best solution, but they don't do it within the context of the neighborhood. So that's why I'm here tonight. I'm in fully support of this neighborhood. Thank you.
Carol, your neighborhood is a very good example of what happened when you didn't do it right. I don't mean the neighbors themselves, but
Yes,
several projects that are occurring right now on Valley Drive, and we're looking at going up North Valley Drive to start correcting the stormwater issues that were caused there by parking lots, removing ponds, things like that.
Yeah.
If that would have not occurred, whenever it occurred 40 years ago, we wouldn't have had the problem in the Rock House that we have. And now that area still floods through there because of what's happening.
Yeah.
And we've come up with several ideas or suggestions or whatever, how we're going to correct that problem also.
part of the problem is the creek was covered over.
Without a doubt, and also a pond was filled in.
Yes. So
Thank you. Minutes are before you of the meeting on December 5th, 2022.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Ms. Sams, or second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Mock. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. New business number 2, there's 4 new 2022-2023 alcohol beverage applications.
I have those, Mayor. If there are 4 new applications. The first one is Rapids Food Mart Inc., located at 1016 North Glenwood Avenue. New license for the sale of packaged beer and packaged wine. The applicant is Candy Garnicia, is applicant here? Oh, hi, good evening. Do you have any questions for this board? Okay, all right. Thank you for attending. We'll do all of these together if that's okay, Mr. Miller, all four.
Yes.
The second one is First Step 0532 LLC. The applicant is AJ Patel. The location is 532 Underwood Street, Suite B, for the new license of selling packaged beer and packaged wine. Is this applicant here this evening? Mr. Patel, do you have any questions? Okay, thank you. Third is Super D Market LLC. Applicant is Nancy Hernandez. Location is 1523 East Morris Street, Suite 2. New license for the sale of packaged beer. Is this applicant here? Hi, good evening. Do you have any questions? Okay, thank you for being here. Last, number 4 is Marcicos Costa Allegra LLC. Applicant is Myra Hernandez. Location of the business is 603 Fleming Street. It's for a new license for the sale of pouring beer, pouring wine, and pouring liquor. Is this applicant? Okay, do you have any questions? Okay, I'd like to present these in the form of a motion to approve.
Motion by Ms. Samms, there's a second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Fair, all in favor, say aye. All
Aye.
opposed, like sign. I think
All for
somebody else filled out a card. Yeah, okay. I know, I'm. We didn't get your card, yeah.
Just bring the card with you if you don't mind, please.
I'm Judy McCamey and my husband Bucky. We are going to be the most affected of anyone from the sale of the property next door to us. I can hardly do this without crying. I'm sorry. We built this house 40 years ago. My children grew up in it. Annalee Hardin played in the neighborhood. Steve Farah grew up there. This is a great family neighborhood. I also sold real estate for 34 years that most of you know. I can't believe it'll do anything but hurt our property value. And I beg y'all, let's don't go around tearing down houses to try to fix. My children played in the creek. I mean, it's just such a happy, fun neighborhood. And I want to keep lovely homes in the neighborhood. I don't want this next door. And I just have to speak my piece. And I hope, I know some of y'all know the value of this neighborhood too. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Next, item 4, general construction agreement with Shaw Integrated and Turf Solutions for Dalton Parks and Recreation synthetic turf replacement projects. Caitlin.
Good evening. So before you is the general construction agreement between the city of Dalton and Shaw Integrated Turf Solutions for the various turf replacement projects that were approved in the 2022 capital improvement projects. The Recreation Department, we requested competitive sealed bids in September for these projects. We reviewed the proposals in October and then conducted interviews with a selected few proposers after that. Based on the submitted offers and then the various proposal evaluation criteria, the Recreation Department recommends moving forward with Ron Nick Soccer Complex and Shaw Lakeshore Soccer Complex with Shaw Integrated Turf Solutions. The project does include the actual manufacturing of material and the installation of that synthetic turf. The project total between Lakeshore and Ron Nick's is $1,248,426. This was presented to the Recreation Commission last week and comes with a positive recommendation.
Questions, Caitlin? Your motion?
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Mock, is there a second? Second. Second by Mr. Goodlett, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Number 5 is resolution 22-12, authorizing the purchase of real property located at 133 Huntington Road. we have a presentation before this is voted on. Unfortunately, Andrew Parker, who leads this, has got COVID, so he's going to do this over Zoom. So
Can you hear me, Mayor?
I can hear you. You on the?
Okay, I'm sorry that I'm not able to make it tonight. I was able to avoid the COVID bug, unfortunately, until Saturday. But my family and I are dealing with that now, as many Daltonians have. So I wanted to be there tonight to be able to present this Huntington Road project in person. But we have our best team assigned to this project, and they're there to present the project tonight. Unfortunately, our Public Works Director, Chad Townsend, is also COVID positive, so he's joining us on Zoom as well. So I'll be brief since I'm remote, but just over 2 years ago, city staff began working with a professional consultant, Arcadis, to develop an effective stormwater plan to address many of the issues we know in the city related to stormwater. City's just over 175 years old, and unfortunately, we had no requirement to have any kind of runoff controls in our ordinance until 2006. So you essentially have 150 years of development with added impervious area, asphalt parking lots, roads, things like that, with no runoff controls. And so it presents a challenge for the staff and to address these issues. And so that fall, in October of 2020, over 40 locations were identified throughout the city related to different types of stormwater issues, historical flooding, that could include, just property flooding or actual structural flooding, property damage due to stream erosion, failing infrastructure, all types of issues. Over 40 of those locations throughout the city were identified. Fast forward to November of this year, we've had time now to analyze all of the issues with our consultant, and we've got more data now than ever to be able to analyze these issues very scientifically. And in November, the Arcadis team delivered a flood abatement plan for the city, which addresses potential solutions for those 40 locations, both off the right of way and in the right of way, to begin moving the needle on bringing some relief and maintaining property values in many cases where we do have structural flooding or property damage. So this abatement plan will be a guiding document for our team moving forward, and we'll work to implement that. We've got several projects going on throughout the city. Jackson Shepard, our project manager over our stormwater unit that works for Chad, is going to give a presentation tonight and share one of those projects with you. And then obviously we'll talk in detail about the project at 133 Huntington Road. With that, I'll turn it over to Jackson. Following Jackson's presentation, Devin Brooks, our right-of-way coordinator, will also present the proposed sales contract for 133 Huntington Road.
Thank you, Andrew. Good evening, Mayor and Council. So as Andrew was alluding to, the Arcadis has worked very hard on developing a flood abatement plan to address the issues that are reported within those our off right of way area concern catalog of over 40 areas of concern of residents and experiencing stormwater issues, whether it's flooding, stream bank erosion, scouring, loss of property, and structural flooding hazards. Before we get into the flood abatement plan, because Huntington Road is directly correlated to that Huntington Road or to the flood abatement plan, I want to start with going over a project that's well underway in construction in the construction phase, which is the Walnut North Drainage Improvements Project, and kind of give an overview of the milestones that have transpired up to this point and how that provides context as to where we stand in the McClellan Creek drainage area. So Walnut North drainage improvements. Of course, this was a very unique situation, very complex situation. Where we have large amounts of water that's being conveyed from the city via the West Hill Cemetery directly onto the backyards of residents who are experiencing flooding, as well as due to the success amounts of water conveyed from city property. They've had significant degradation in their conveyance pipes back behind their properties, causing sinkholes, as well as all the way downstream where this outfalls to, where we have significant degradation of the stream buffer caused by erosion and scouring due to the velocities of the runoff coming through this drainage area. And ultimately, existing conditions, Arcadis found that the level of service in many of these places, these residential locations, were 1 to 2 years. So any storm event greater than a 1 year or 2 year storm would cause significant flooding. Project milestones for this, for the Walton North drainage improvements, include the initial drainage, the initial engineering. We, of course, compiled historical data, residential accounts, and our own engineering information to identify a potential solution. And from that initial engineering phase, using those eyewitness accounts in our right-of-way catalog, we developed an improvement scenario. And from that improvement scenario, that included all encompassing from flow attenuation to also stream restoration, as well as infrastructure rehab to get this conveyance network fully up to standards that it needs to be. From that, the corrective action plan that was needed. Of course, we revised our extended services to allow for a corrective action plan to be able to correct conveyance issues off right of way, where we have significant runoff coming from the city. And of course, conducted a public meeting following this improvement scenario to gauge the public interest and feedback and listen to if there's anything we missed within this improvement scenario. From there, we've finalized the design of the West Hill Cemetery improvements, as well as the bypass system. We finalized our approach for it, and the bypass system is currently under design. Going into phase 1 of improvements, which is actively the plans have been issued for construction, and contract has been awarded, starting with the West Hill Cemetery improvements, which are our greatest means of flow attenuation and flood reduction impacts, which are implementing a brand new concept in our region, which is regenerative stormwater conveyance. It's a method of green infrastructure that provides infiltration as well as meaningful flow attenuation on an embankment, sort of a cascading pools per se. Moving down from there, you'd see those blue areas, of course, are expanding our existing dry detention basins to maximize capacity without impacting grave sites. Also, within the phase 1 improvements, which are almost finished, we have one more property to finish to complete, which are the infrastructure rehab off right of way, which is where part of where our corrective action plan came into play, where we used a process called centrifugal spin cast concrete pipelining, which provides a 10,000 PSI coating to these rusted out corrugated metal pipes, basically providing a whole new pipe without having to rip out the yards. And this the green area you see on the bottom left of the slide is where we a significant sinkhole had formed and was encroaching on the house, and we were able to restore that and back to its original condition. And then also moving down to the outfall location downstream from the West Hill Cemetery improvements, which is where we'll have our bypass system will tie into, which I'll get into in just a second, but also our stream bank restoration, where we have, of course, significantly incised streams caused by velocity and flow of runoff within the deriving from city property, as well as posing structural flooding or structural hazards, putting adjacent properties at risk due to the scouring and erosion present. And also, lastly, on this one, we're waiting, should receive any day now these technical specifications for the request for proposals for this project. Moving on to phase 2 improvements. Right now, we're currently in the design phase for this one, which is to ultimately take the runoff from the cemetery. Given that this is an intermittent flow, we're able to, from a permitting perspective, be able to take this water off from behind these residents and bypass it down Emory Street, all the way down through Ridge Street, where it will outfall onto private property, partly where we'll also will have the corrective action plan comes to play. Where it'll ultimately pick back up onto Franklin Street and come down Valley Drive and outfall in between 705 and 707 Valley Drive. So ultimately, this is going to be a full restoration and restore the level of service that's really needed in these residents, providing in a lot of cases a 50 to 100-year level of service. So moving back to the flood abatement plan. So part of the flood abatement plan, Arcadis modeled multiple areas throughout the city. This is not just concentrated to a certain location, certain side of the city. This is in all drainage basins, all watersheds, and all tributary streams. And partly what comes to this is, which was directly correlated to what we're discussing tonight, is the Huntington Road stormwater project. We received the improvements from Arcadis just a few weeks ago, ultimately from the broader scheme. And this is not limited also, might add, this is not limited solely to what will be proposed. Potentially there are ongoing evaluations upstream as well. But from that initial flood abatement plan, the 3 locations within the Dixon Acres and McClellan Creek drainage areas for potential improvements are located at 119 Broadview Terrace, potential stormwater detention location, the Bridgewater Place area, expand on the retention located on that property, as well as then, of course, the Huntington Road, 133 Huntington Road property. Now, part of this, and this is kind of given that explanation of this is a bigger picture here. Huntington Road is just a single faction of the improvements within the McClellan Creek drainage basin. And the numbers you see here in the green are for 100-year storm event improvements. You're looking at Lisa Lane Culvert, 17% reduction in flows, North Tibbs Culvert, 13% reduction in flows in a 100-year storm event. When we start talking about, how is this really going to start moving the needle? When you take into account, the flood elevations, the floodway elevations in proximity to areas of concern downstream, that 10 and 13 to 18% reduction really does make an impact and ultimately can solve a lot of people's problems potentially. So now we get back to 133 Huntington Road specifically. Of course, these photos you see here are documented flooding occurring on the property. This particular photos were taken of it encroaching onto the house. And if you look at let's see, I'm skipping ahead. So that's the previous flooding concerns. Utilizing the LiDAR data that Arcadis used for their flood abatement plan, I developed this 3D model to sort of better visualize what we're dealing with here. Of course, what's unique to our area is within the county is we have a lot of water coming off the mountain, which develops a lot of velocity, causes a lot of stream bank erosion, scouring, as well as flooding downstream. And there's, of course, within the Rift Valley, there's not a lot of places currently that have not been developed into we could provide meaningful flow attenuation and flood relief. Put in perspective, you have Crown Creek Tributary 7. This is one of the largest tributaries for McClellan Creek, which flows directly through Dixon Acres, and McClellan Creek Trib 5, which is the pink or magenta color that flows down through ultimately under Lisa Lane. And of course, the red box here is show you the proximity of 133 Huntington Road, and I'm going to get into as well as why this particular location is has been identified by Arcadis and our engineers as a place to begin our improvements, and why this will provide meaningful impact. So also this particular location here, this is panning north. This is a old road bed that's just on the north edge of the 133 Huntington Road lot. Of course, there used to be a culvert here that provided even greater bottleneck during intense storm events, but also this kind of gives you starting to get into the reasonings why this particular location is a suitable location for stormwater detention. This particular location, you have a berm that's just north, which would be, in this case, with respect to McClellan Creek, just downstream of the corner of 133 Huntington Road. And given during intense storm events, we had a lot of flow going through McClellan Creek and a lot of flow coming down McClellan Trip 7. You have a lot of turbulence that will develop here. And given the elevations and proximity of this roadbed acting pretty much as a berm with the turbulence that happens at the point of confluence, it's going to start to back up. Where it'll start to back up is directly correlated to the primary contributing stream, which is, of course, McClellan Creek, which ultimately would be right onto 133 Huntington Road. Now, why this location? Furthermore, so looking at this visual here, you see the green area, of course, is 133 Huntington Road, and this shaded area you see here is the 100-year floodplain. It might be difficult to see on the screen, but there's a black line here that provides a visual reference to the floodway. So for this location, why this is ideal is, for one, the property resides within the floodway, and then the house itself resides within the 100-year floodplain. And if we look back at our visuals from historical flooding, these accounts and these visuals actually furthermore verify that FEMA's modeling is correct in this location, as we're seeing their visual evidence of these floodplains becoming inundated as of recently. And property also resides at point of confluence two perennial streams, as well as it's not shown on that previous map, but Crown Creek Trip 6 actually comes down. McClellan Creek Trip 6 comes down off of Dugout Road. Tibbs Road, and connects just downstream, ever so slightly just downstream. So it's at the point of confluence for streams, which was what I alluded to earlier previously. And then the flooding within the FEMA floodplain is documented to occur, and directly upstream of the properties. It's also directly upstream of properties with known stormwater related problems, all the way down to Tibbs Road. Bridgewater Place is a known area of concern for, of course, multiple residents, and all the way down to North Tibbs Road, where we have flooding occurring as well. So, putting all this into perspective and where we are and where we're with this project, the McClellan Creek drainage improvements, as well as with the in perspective to the Walnut North drainage improvements, we understand that there are ongoing problems with stream bank erosion and scouring occurring upstream of this location and within Dixon Acres, and as well as the concerns about wanting to look upstream. Right now, Arcadis is also looking. We are continuing to look upstream west of the interstate for potential stormwater improvements to provide a beneficial impact to everyone on the other side of the interstate as well. To try to go as far upstream as we possibly can, as well as we are committed to providing an open line of communication as we proceed with the McClellan Creek drainage improvements moving forward with property owners to understand the issues, as we have learned from Walnut North drainage improvements, and provided changes to our plans based on those community feedback, because that is very important, of course. And also this property will be our, if we were to acquire this property for stormwater improvements, this will be our third acquisition for stormwater related projects. We also have ongoing projects in North Glenwood drainage area, Prater Alley, as well as multiple more places within the flood abatement plan that we're currently looking into further improvements. So this, of course, this visual here is of the property at 133 Huntington Road. And this is the visual that Arcadis did provide from a landscape architect as far as a concept for what this would potentially look like. And that being said, we are completely committed to working in conjunction with the homeowner association and the architectural committee within that homeowners association, Dixon Acres, to provide what the neighborhood needs and wants are and desires are to fit the fit the improvements within this location to everything that they would desire, as well as far as a concerns of a maintenance situation and concerns about our maintenance, where this particular location, Public Works, of course, Chad can attest to this as well. We would treat this no differently than it would be Knob North Golf Course or around the front greens of City Hall. We have actively working on developing a maintenance plan that would provide the necessary and requested maintenance needs to keep this a beautiful location and an asset to Dixon Acres.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm going to present an overview of the sales contract that we presented for 133 Huntington Road. The city retained John Murray of Childers Associates to appraise the property. He is pre-qualified by Georgia Department of Transportation for property appraisals for right-of-way acquisitions. The date of the valuation was August 30th, 2022. 5 comparison properties were used to determine the value. All were within a 3/4 mile radius of the property and in proximity to 133 Huntington. Dates of sale varied from May 2021 to August 2022 and comparable in age and size to 133 Huntington. In addition, 3 of the properties past sales were also located on Huntington Drive. The value of the appraisal was $704,000. By law, the city cannot offer less than the appraised value. Moving expenses were determined by using the Federal Register of the Uniform Relocation Assistance fixed moving costs and came to $4,325. An additional $500 was added to reimburse for the inspection of a new home. This was determined by speaking with a local licensed real estate official. The sum $4,825 was rounded up to $5,000. The total property offered to the property owners of 133 Huntington was $709,000. The flood mitigation project plans were not complete at the time of the offer. Therefore, the city did not require that the residents vacate their home immediately. A 10-month lease agreement was proposed with a transactional payment of $100 a month to allow the $100 a month to allow the property owners to search for a new home before the required relocation. The residents are required to maintain and insure the home during this leasing period. Thank you.
Who's the appraisal? Works for the city. She works for the city.
The appraisal's by an appraiser. I think he asked who the appraiser was too.
The appraiser is John Childers, MAI. John Murray, MAI. He's with Childers and Childers Associates out of Atlanta.
Okay. Andrew, are you still there?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay, so did you have a question for me? I'm sorry.
No, I didn't know if you had something else to follow this or not.
No, that concludes the staff presentation. I'll just say that we recognize this is a first step in the totality of the solution we think that we can present for really an area other than the Walnut North area that Mr. Shepherd talked about tonight. We had more complaints or concerns presented than anywhere else in the city. And that's why this particular project has come to the top of the list in terms of priority. And the city attorney has drafted a resolution for the council to consider entering the sales contract with the property owner. And I would ask the city attorney if he had anything to add regarding the resolution.
Oh, thank you, Andrew. No, Mr. Mayor and Council, the resolution on the table doesn't need to be altered in any way. It's simply, if it's this council's policy to acquire the property in accordance with the contract that Ms. Brooks has brought us, and that the All Goods have indicated they will agree to. We're acquiring this property, frankly, in lieu of condemnation. And so the property could be taken for public purposes. And I understand that it's this council's policy assiduously to not do that if there's a purchase option. So this authorizes the mayor and the clerk to execute agreements and contracts. And I do want to emphasize and point out, I know I've gotten several questions in the community, and particularly from residents of Dixon Acres, about the contract price under the 2005 Georgia Property Owners Bill of Rights. City, county, no city or county, we have to go with the appraisal we do. We can't make it up in turn. We can't cut a nickel here or a dime there. So strictly what Devin got from Mr. Murray was a fairly substantial report with all these comments she mentioned. And anybody can look at it. It's an open record. And see how he derived the value that he had. Well, once we do that, and we indicate we may take property, but we prefer to purchase it, then we're in a situation under Georgia law where we have to extend that. We can't just keep getting appraisals till we get the price. So I just want the public to understand.
Val, do you all have a?
My name is Valerie Brantley. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. I wanted to address this council as the newest resident of Dixon Acres. My husband and I have worked in Dalton, both of us each for 15 years, and we just moved to Dalton this summer. A large reason, and I think it's no secret to this council or to Dalton, is that housing is a dire need for our city. The major reason that we moved here to Dalton this summer was because of Dixon Acres. Dixon Acres is one of just a precious community within Dalton. And I think you will see more young professionals that, work in Dalton, but live elsewhere, choose to move to Dalton eventually if we retain beautiful neighborhoods like Dixon Acres. So I just wanted to give this council that statement, because I do think that is a need for our town, for young professionals to come here. I think the other one thing that I have to say tonight is a question for this council from a timing perspective. When you look at this presentation, there are a number of other areas that appeared to be that we could look at perhaps starting this project elsewhere. And so from a timing perspective, my question for the council is there another location that we could start such that we could table the Dixon Acres project? Or is it truly a timing issue? Is this a bond issue that requires the dollars to be used from a certain specific time?
I'll respond to that. I was on the state transportation board for many years. I worked with Devin Brooks, and we've sat through a lot of these type meetings before, haven't we, Devin? So it's complicated. Sometimes if you have somebody come forward, a willing seller, you sometimes look at that before you decide to take another property. Maybe the other property might have some advantages, and maybe that might be something that you look at down the future. But here we had a willing seller, and of course, as you saw from the presentation, Valerie, we had there's a problem here in the city, especially in the McClellan Basin there. So I think that's really why we're considering this right now. The Allgood family came forward and said they were willing to sell their property. And of course, when I heard that, I'm the one that asked that there be a public hearing when there was a few weeks ago. I also asked that there be a public hearing several months ago when the city was looking at a similar project up there by the cemetery area. And since that, I think the city's adopted a policy where when we do this in the future, we'll always have a public hearing because from my days, with the State Transportation Board, that was our policy. Before we ever did anything, we had a public hearing, and so that's why we had the one several weeks ago.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
At what point would we, if we had any comments to make, would we make it after the motions made and seconded, or would we do it at this point?
I think now would be most appropriate.
Okay. Well, I wanted to make a couple of comments just because I think all of my family has lived in this neighborhood for 55 years. And it's certainly very dear to me in every sense of the word. I hope I saw that scene of the street. I hope I'll be going down that street, every day that I have left in my life. And so I have obviously had a lot of sleepless nights. I've been in public service in many capacities over the last few decades, and I've had many difficult decisions to make in each of those positions, but this ranks up there certainly at the top of the list. So I've had people actually from the neighborhood on each side of this issue. Now, certainly the vast majority of you are opposed to it, and I understand that, but I have had people from the neighborhood, have the opposite viewpoint. So, when we make these decisions, we can't just take a poll and decide, well, I guess we could, but it wouldn't really be what we as policymakers should do. We should obviously listen to everybody's concerns, but we also have an obligation to, on behalf of the city, to look at the problem we have in the future with stormwater. And then, like I mentioned a minute ago to Ms. Brantley, the opportunities that may come up. I think a lot of you probably know that there's a piece of property just to the west of City Hall that we're going to have to actually take by eminent domain because we didn't have a willing buyer. And that's a very critical piece of property right here as far as the stormwater problems in the future. And we may have to, nobody likes to take property, but at some point in the future, we may have to take some other pieces of property by eminent domain. Obviously, if you have somebody that's a willing seller, you have to look at that because as Devin knows, you don't have willing sellers a lot of the time. And of course, as Mr. Miller said, we have to take we have to pay the proper value of the property based on professional appraisals. But I just want all of you to know that that when I first moved to the subdivision, all this property was vacant property that we're talking about right here. And I've played in all those creeks that you talked about earlier, just like your children did. And like I say, for about the first 10 or 15 years, that was vacant. The Saman family bought that piece of property from Mr. Dixon, and I guess under the standards at that time, let them build a house there. But I agree, Judy, that it shouldn't have ever been built there. I mean, there was cattails there, you know, when we moved there. So the property, if the council decides to accept this proposal, would go back to being what it was, I guess, the first 10 or 15 years when we lived there in the subdivision, when it was vacant. And whatever the council decides to do, I've certainly told Jackson and Chad and Andrew that if this property is not maintained properly with a pleasing aesthetic appearance, I'm going to be their worst nightmare, whether I'm on the council or not. And they'll probably never want to hear from me if the property's not properly maintained. And I do want you to work with the committee we have there if the council decides to do something here, you know, to be sure that it's aesthetically pleasing. I see Mr. Didier's back there, and I know he's head of the committee right now, but it's a very active committee, and we do take a lot of pride in our subdivision. And so that's obviously a concern if the council decides to do this. But I just want everybody to know that obviously I have two hats here. One hat, of course, is a longtime resident and future resident of this particular part of the city, the subdivision Dixon Acres. And also as a member of the council that has to look at stormwater issues anywhere in the city and listen to expert testimony like we heard at the public hearing a few weeks ago, as well as the comments that were made here today, and then make a decision. You know, do I wish I was at home right now instead of here having to do this? Probably so, but you know, nobody made me do this job. I volunteered for it. And when I did it, I took an oath to make the decisions as best I could on behalf of the city. I think that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Anybody else have any questions, comments?
I have a couple of comments. One of the challenging things is I steal this from Benny Dunn often, is all of the easy projects have been done. Dalton is fully developed, and in our city limits, there are very few places that there's an opportunity to build something new. So much of the infrastructure redos that need to happen are going to take place on occupied property, be it commercial or be it residential. And when development is happening in a community, no one wants to get in the way of it and think about the unintended consequences of vast impervious surfaces. And that's what we've inherited. And particularly Andrew is the leader of this professional group that the city has inherited are redos. Their infrastructure revitalization projects. And stormwater is probably at the top of that list. You look at communities like the city of Atlanta has issued a special sales tax to try to deal with infrastructure of water and sewer. And we're thankful to not be in that boat, but we have to do something about stormwater. 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, this council made the very intentional decision to get serious about stormwater mitigation that extends to dealing with erosion issues. And I know there are residents here tonight, there are residents in the city that even have safety issues that Ms. Harden referenced this evening. And we have to rededicate ourselves as the responsibility to citizens to do work off of, onto private property. Because it is our responsibility as stewards of the city and of your tax dollars to take care of these infrastructure issues that, if not handled, are going to continue to impact citizens and businesses. Jackson has painted a picture that this would potentially be the third property acquisition. We have other active projects that are ongoing, and it would be premature to disclose that there are other properties that are forthcoming, that there are willing sellers that have been identified by this objective third party that is a professional expert in the field, that Arcadis has identified and saying, these are your opportunities to piecemeal together stormwater mitigation. If we were looking at building a community from scratch, you would not piecemeal it together. You would restrict development areas, and because of our topography, it'd be pretty easy to figure out where the low points are. But I think that the due diligence has not just been, it has been at a very exhaustive level. Whether we have conveyed to our community in the best possible way the exhaustive due diligence, well, that's up for debate, and we can improve our communication style, and we will improve our practices going forward. But this has been vetted as an appropriate property. There is a willing seller, and I have complete confidence as an individual that Arcadis is good at doing what it does, at identifying the proper locations that will best mitigate flood reduction, and that we have a team put together, a professional staff that are going to execute this. We are also, as the mayor said, financially equipped to carry the ball all the way across the goal line. We're not going to acquire a couple of properties and then stop and say, well, we don't have the funding. We're privileged to be financially sound, and we will continue to move forward and mitigate stormwater. But I do think we have room for improvement on how we communicate with our citizens about stormwater, so that it doesn't look like an isolated issue of this one property, that it's a larger opportunity to improve infrastructure in the city of Dalton. One citizen did share with me today, does this property acquisition directly improve stormwater control for the Dixon Acres subdivision? It, correct me if I'm wrong, Jackson, but has a bigger impact on other areas. So the question is, what are we going to do for your subdivision? And we're going to have to go upstream of and mitigate stormwater that's coming down onto you all. There's a lot of impervious surface above you all. And Chad and Andrew and I had some time to meet last week, and unfortunately they're not here. But what I would look forward to after the holidays is to be able to share with Dixon Acres subdivision and other citizens about where the opportunities are to mitigate stormwater and slow it as it comes downstream to you all. And Arcadis has identified those pockets of properties and places that are on the west side of the interstate. So we're going to have to eat this elephant one bite at a time, dealing with stormwater and piecemeal it together. But I have confidence that this is the right thing to do, the thing being stormwater mitigation. So I just wanted to share that I think the due diligence has been exhaustive. How it's been communicated, there's some room for improvement, admittedly.
One thing that will affect Dixon Acres fairly quickly is some stream bank restoration will be occurring after the first of the year too, on those creeks that flow through Dixon Acres. Resolution 22-12 is before you. Do I hear a motion on it?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Ferris, second. Second by Mr. Goodlett. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Number 6, resolution 22-16, resolution accepting donation of real property of Dolores Penley Howalt individually and Dolores Penley Howalt as trustee of the Dolores Penley Howalt Living Trust dated September 22nd, 2021.
Yes, Mayor. This is a proposed donation of a 4.32 acre tract. Ms. Howalt approached the city about conveying this property. It lies along the north side of Lakemont Drive as you go down the hill approaching its west tie-in with Dugout Road. This property, the west boundary of the property actually abuts the headwaters of Tar Creek. So much like the Huntington Road project, this property will also allow us to consider implementing stormwater improvements. We've got some major property loss just downstream of this location on some of the commercial properties that were developed up close to the creek. It was actually featured in the flood abatement plan that we talked about earlier as a location that could be used for stormwater improvements. The property is very low lying, and that's probably why it's never been developed in the past. There was an independent appraisal of $75,000, but again, this resolution presented to you tonight for consideration is just to accept the donation, and then the city attorney would work with the donor to get the deeds issued to the city to convey the property into the city.
Questions, Andrew? Your motion by Mr. Moxley, second. Second by Ms. Sams. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Number 7, appointments. Ms. Sams, I think. you
Yes,
have-
I have those. Mr. Mayor, we'll go through these pretty quickly. Can we do these all just collectively in one? Okay. I'm going to put these in the form of a motion. They are the following. The Land Bank Authority Liaison, Steve Farrow. Joint Development Authority appointee, Frank Robertson. Joint Development Authority appointee, Bill Davies. Joint Development Authority appointee, Bob Caperton. Health Department Board appointee, Rod Weaver. Water, Light and Sinking Fund appointee, Ed Anthony.
Did you miss a couple or are you just going down the list?
Those are to remain vacant, but this time.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay, I got you.
Recreation Commission appointee, Hector Santiago. Public Safety Commission appointee, Truman Whitfield. Trade Center Authority appointee, Mike Kinsey. Historic Preservation Commission, Manuel Meza. Historic Preservation Commission reappointment, Reed Fincher. Historic Preservation Commission Chairman reappointment, Jeff Granillo. Miscellaneous appointments, Municipal Court Judge, Robert Cowan. Mayor Pro Tem, Annalee Harlan Sams. Chief of Police, Cliff Kaysen. Fire Chief, Todd Pangle. Fire Marshal, Matt Daniel. City Attorney, Terry Miller. We'll move through these pretty quickly. These appointments are the same as last year with one change for Housing Authority. To take the place of Tyree Goodlett will be Dennis Mock. The other following are Airport, Annalee Sams, Building Authority, David Pennington, along with myself, Annalee Sams, CVB, Dennis Mock, Creative Arts Guild, Steve Farah, Defined Contribution Committee, Annalee Sams, Downtown Development Authority, Annalee Sams, DWCDC, David Pennington, Finance and Administration, David Pennington, along with all council members are included. Joint Development Authority, Dennis Mock. Library Liaison, Steve Farrow. MPO Policy, Dennis Mock. Municipal Court Liaison, Steve Farrow. Pension Board, David Pennington and Dennis Mock. Public Safety, Annalee Sams. Public Works and Facilities, Tyree Goodlett, Annalee Sams. Recreation Commission, Dennis Mock. Regional Development, reappointment of Kenny Gowan. Service delivery, myself, Annalee Sams, and Andrew Parker. Solid waste management, Tyree Goodlet and David Pennington. TAD policies, Dennis Mock. Technology liaison, Tyree Goodlet. Trade Center Authority, Steve Farrow. Tree Board, Steve Farrow, and Water, Light, and Sinking Fund, Steve Farrow. I'd like to put those in the motion to approve.
Second. Second, Mr. Good, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, like that. Okay, no supplemental business. There are announcements. City offices will be closed Friday, December 23rd and Monday, December 26th, 2022 for the Christmas holidays, and Monday, January 2nd, 2023 for New Year's. The next city council meeting will be held Tuesday, January 17th, 2023.